look like. We're starting the video.
Well, people can see the rest of you. Yeah, so I was telling Tom earlier, yesterday it was raining quite hard in LA, and I was like, it's just crazy that like no part of my apartment is leaking. The leak started today.
Oh no.
It's horrible. It's like well away from all my electronics. So I mean,
good.
yeah. But it's, there's like sponges and various.
Is it just coming in through where the window meets the wall or the sill or whatever?
By the window. Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, it was raining so hard earlier. I don't know. Who even knows?
Oh my God.
It's almost like not even worth telling my landlord about it because like it never rains as hard as it did this morning.
Yeah,
really?
I know. Well, that's why I have this leak in the skylight that only happens if it rains like it did today enough that a little bit of water builds up on the roof and then it comes in.
Exactly.
And then it stops. So it's like, do I really want to?
Right. Yeah, like, I mean, you could probably, caulk it, but I'm like,
it's all
someone's got to be in the apartment.
Yeah.
I'll just do
it.
it.
As a homeowner, I'm one of those guys that like, it's something else I have to fork out money for.
Yep.
Wow.
I am also a homeowner. I just don't own the home I'm in.
Well, that and your home is in the middle, so the people who would be leaked on would be the floor above you.
What?
Right?
No. There's nobody.
In Oakland, is there a unit above you? I think.
Yeah, I see. Yes, no, that's true. I never had any leaks in Oakland. Knock on wood. Sorry, Brett.
Oh, you're knocking. You don't have to say sorry.
Yeah, right.
It worked.
Just in case. Is this wood? Here, that's wood. There we go.
It's like knock on Formica. Darn it! I'm so sorry.
This was a plastic composite made to look like wood. Crap.
There was actually, speaking of just, weird things that happened to us the other day. Well, not the other day. Sometime in the last several months, I said something. And I was like, knock on wood. There's no wood. And the person was like, what are you doing? What do you mean? And I was like, knock on wood, but there's no wood around us. So like, I'm jinxing us.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, well, okay. Like, never heard of this before.
Never been around wood spirits? Never been a druid?
Or just never heard the term.
That adage.
I thought it was like so weird that she was like, are you superstitious? And I'm like, no. Really.
No, it's just a thing. Like,
is this some zodiac thing? Yeah.
All right. You guys ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Let's do it then. Here we go.
Hello, all you beautiful people. The Daily Tech News Show is brought to you by you. You can find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com. And we thank you for your support.
This is the Daily Tech News for Thursday, March 22nd, 2018. From DTNS headquarters in Los Angeles, I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline, I'm Sarah Lane.
Joining us today, very happy to have tech reporter Annie Gaus back in the house.
Hello.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good to have you back, Annie.
Good to be here.
Thanks to our producer, Roger Chang, for making this all possible.
No, thank you for having. Well, yeah, I did that.
We are going to talk about whether we should just break up everybody. Google, Facebook, the whole shebang. Let's start, however, with a few tech things you should know.
Instagram announced a new algorithm update to ensure that newer posts will be more likely to appear first in your feed and make the experience fresher overall. Instagram first switched to an algorithmically sorted feed back in 2016. Some people are upset about it. Most of us have gotten used to it, which got updated, though, to include recommended posts late last year. Instagram is also testing something called New Posts. It's a new button that will let users choose when they'd like to refresh the feed instead of it happening automatically, which some users complained buried content they would have liked to see.
Apple's service is on track to be the company's primary revenue generator in the future, according to Morgan Stanley analyst Kat Huberty. She believes in 5 years, services which include iTunes, App Store, Apple Music, iCloud, Apple Pay, and Apple Care will be 50% of total company revenue growth, with the iPhone making just 22% of revenue growth over the same period.
Oh, remember when it was a hardware company?
It ain't. It's getting less anyway all the time. Let's talk a little bit about Mark Zuckerberg's apology tour.
Mark Zuckerberg did some interviews with several news outlets yesterday, apologizing for the situation with Cambridge Analytica. Zuckerberg also said people value privacy over sharing data and that the company has been slow to realize that. He apologized profusely for that as well. He also said he's uncomfortable being the one making decisions around content, although I'm not exactly sure who else it would be.
He said if Congress calls him, he guesses he'd go. He's real sorry. We've talked quite a bit about this on this show. Annie, what's your take on this whole fiasco?
Oh God, I mean, there's so much to unpack here, but I guess of all of the interviews he went on this apology tour, I found the CNN one the least interesting. It felt to me like just more of the same vagueness that we normally get from Mark Zuckerberg. When anything seems to go wrong, he seems to default to talking points, very well-honed talking points, but some of the same talking points about community. And I also found the way that he broke down what he sees as users' preferences to be a little bit of an oversimplification. I thought the Wired interview, it was the Recode interview, was a little more telling when he basically admitted that he doesn't want to be the person to arbitrate content across the web, and seems a little bit too surprised that the fact that he's ended up in this position, given that he's run this company for 14 years.
Besides the fact that it's Mark Zuckerberg, arguably the most powerful tech company in the world, a tremendous personal power. If I were in his position, and some of these things were coming to light, there is a part of me that's like, yeah, you didn't really know you were going to deal with this. Now you have to. You are very sorry. And kind of confused as well. But, it's not like, I still don't think that the people running Facebook are a bunch of monsters. I feel like it has become something that has run away with itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm about to say, I'm going to assume that Mark Zuckerberg is being genuine in everything he said in these interviews.
Of course.
What it showed me is that Facebook doesn't realize that they can't, and this, I go into this in a little more detail in my Patreon column today, they can't take the benefits of the open web they wanted and then shut off everything else and expect it to work the way things did in 1999, right? There's a consequence to saying, well, we're going to actually control your data. We're not going to let you take your data outside of Facebook. It only goes outside of Facebook if we want it to. He talks a lot about, like, we were all for sharing, but I guess people don't like sharing.
Right.
They were all about sharing for you, not letting you take your data. You can't take your data easily out of Facebook and take it somewhere else. You don't have all the control over data. He gave users a little bit of control over data. And the upshot is, when you take responsibility and prevent people from doing what they want with their data, then they're going to expect you to be responsible for the effects of what happens when people use that data.
Right. I thought the most of the entirety of everything that he said, I thought the most annoying part for me was him setting up that false binary. Like, well, I guess you guys don't want to share data. That's not, that's not really the case. It's exactly as you said, Tom. It's about the fact that we have little visibility or not enough visibility into how Facebook is sharing our data on our behalf.
You want to fix this problem? Be more like WordPress. Say your data is yours. You can take it whenever you want, wherever you want. We're not stopping you. You can use your own domain names, do whatever you want. You don't see WordPress.com have these kind of problems because they are truly letting you be in charge, and they charge you for a service they provide. Whereas Facebook, they're more than that. I'm not saying that's wrong for them to be more than that, but there's a responsibility that goes with that.
I mean, WordPress and Facebook are also not easily compared.
Not anymore, no. But I'm just saying, if he wants the benefits of being WordPress without being WordPress, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right, exactly.
Tempe, Arizona police released dash cam footage from the Uber autonomous car that struck and killed a pedestrian. One view shows the safety driver appearing to look down prior to the crash. The other view shows a dark road with a pedestrian walking a bicycle appearing suddenly in the roadway. This footage, again, as we have said with all of this stuff, it is very difficult to say any of this proves anything without doing a lot of work, which a lot of people are doing. Uber's doing it. National Transportation Safety Board is doing it. Tempe Police are doing it. A lot of people are working on what this actually says, and it involves a lot of calculations and really understanding. However, casual appearance makes this look like it was avoidable to me. I don't know if that's true, but it certainly looks that way.
Avoidable by the driver that was supposed to
If the driver's
take control?
looking up, it seems like you would have had time to slam on the brakes and slow the car down. It's very apparent that the car does not slow down at all.
Well,
Yes.
and that's, part of the, the whole issue with having a driver as a backup, right? Autonomous vehicles, if they work correctly, you're kind of just sitting there, like, hopefully never having to do anything. So you might get even more used to being like, might look down at my phone, or not saying that he was looking at his phone, he or she, or, look outside, or I don't know, look down at whatever, look away from where you're supposed to look. So again, very gray area.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting. Hopefully at some point we'll learn more about what exactly happened within the car's system at that moment. I mean, frankly, it kind of surprised me that they were running them at night. I don't know why I was surprised by that, but I just assumed it would be,
Yeah.
It's obviously harder to see bicyclists, and it happens all the time with human drivers, unfortunately. But I think it'll be interesting as we learn more, and hopefully we will, about what happened within the system. Was it partly a system failure, or was it completely, the negligence of the driver? It'll be interesting to see, what happened in this instance, and from a technical perspective, what where the failure was.
Because Tempe Police still say this is probably unavoidable. So there may be, the video may be deceptive in the way it looks. It looks avoidable to me. It looks like if the safety driver would have been paying attention, the brakes could have applied faster. And Annie, as you rightly point out, the sensors apparently failed because it doesn't seem like the car slowed down. Maybe the car was slowing down and it just isn't apparent from the video. There are so many questions.
Bloomberg reports YouTube intends to ban videos that promote or link to websites selling firearms and accessories. This is starting in April. The company will also prohibit instructional videos on how to build firearms. In related news, Reddit has also updated its policies to ban the trade of firearms or explosives or drugs. That includes alcohol and tobacco, services with physical sexual contact, stolen goods, personal info, and counterfeit. Reddit subsequently shut down several subreddits engaged in those activities. I was listening to a report on this on NPR this morning, the YouTube portion of it. And, there's the whole argument of like, well, if you shut down stuff that's technically instructional, and not meant to hurt anybody, that's a real problem as well. How is YouTube going to, deal with that side of things? I'm not sure YouTube cares about that right now. I think that, in general, these companies they got to lay down the law and appeal to what is considered to be the bigger problem.
Somebody on Twitter asked me if this might be a response to the change in the law in the United States regarding safe harbor, to say you can't claim safe harbor if you are encouraging illegal activity. And there may be something to that where YouTube and Reddit are saying, we want to make sure that we're on the safe side of this issue. I think it mostly has to do with public sentiment, that they want, that there is pressure on them to do something. And so they've taken these actions.
Right.
CNET sources say Best Buy will stop selling Huawei products in the next few weeks. Neither company would comment on whether that is true, and if so, why. Huawei said Best Buy is still a strong partner. That's all anybody would say. It may have to do with the fact that the U.S. has announced plans to place billions of dollars of tariffs on Chinese goods. The majority likely to be focused on the tech industry, just because China makes a lot of tech. White House says it'll announce a final list of goods subject to the tariffs in the next few weeks. A lot of details to be worked out on this. It likely, from what I have read, would not apply to things like iPhones, which are assembled and then shipped to the United States, but sold by a U.S. company. But it would likely apply to Huawei, which makes its phones and ships them from China. It's a Chinese company.
Yeah, I mean, that was my main question about this, is that given how complex supply chains can be, what exactly is considered a Chinese company? And I guess that's, that it's hard to imagine putting huge tariffs on Apple products, for example.
Yeah, I don't think that would go down well with several large entities in the United States. Probably not a lot of people either.
Yeah.
Well, and there are a lot of companies that, would conceivably maybe move their operations to the US, because of increased tariffs on where they had been, working with manufacturers up until now. That's a simplified version of, what this would do. But it seems to me that if there are certain companies that could bring their operations in-house, so to speak, speaking about the US, that's where this is originating from.
Maybe. Yeah. I feel like it's more about punishing Chinese companies that are on Chinese soil. But I'm certain that the administration would not mind if it had that side effect that you're describing, for sure.
Okay, moving on to Slack, which just updated its privacy policies and tools to let premium customers at a certain tier, not all premium customers, but those who pay for a certain amount of features, download all the data from their workspace. That's both public and private. So if you have a DM with somebody, that would be included, apparently without informing members of the community. Slack says this is in order to comply with the General Data Protection Regulation, or the GDPR. That's new. Slack previously offered something called a compliance report, which required a workspace to enable this function beforehand, but then also notify members beforehand. For non-paying Slack accounts, they can use this new tool as well if they either show valid legal process, show consent of members, or show a requirement or right under applicable laws. So in other words, if you're not paying, this is going to be a huge hassle for you. But if you are, easier than ever.
I understand what's going on here. The GDPR says that you as a company have to make the data easy to remove for the client. So if the client, the citizen of the EU gets control over the data. To Slack, a paying customer is the client, right? And the way Slack is set up, those paying customers are largely companies. When you're a company, the people in your Slack are your employees. There's lots of settled law that employees don't have rights over their company communications. The company does. So in that light, all of this makes sense. Slack is saying, hey, companies who pay for our product, you now, under the GDPR, have the right to pull your data out. And no, we can't make it hard for you to do it by requiring you to tell your employees they're your employees. That's between you and them, right? We're out of it now. It is weird, though, because I could start paying for the DTNS Slack. The Slack patrons are not my employees, and then suddenly I could see their DMs.
You have access to without even asking me if it was okay.
Exactly. Well, not the DTNS ones where you're an employee. That's different. I'm talking about the patrons, right? That's like they're not employees. So it does seem like there's something weird here. That's a side effect of applying this.
It also seems to suffer from bad timing. Just because we're all talking about privacy and, people being aware, even if it's okay that you download, everything in the DTNS boss's Slack, the fact that you don't necessarily have to disclose to anybody that you're doing it, whereas before you did.
I wonder, though, under the GDPR, if I went and paid Slack and then took the data out of Slack, would I be violating the GDPR because they are not my employees? And Slack may be their rationale is like, hey, that's between you and the members of your Slack community. If you violate the GDPR doing this, that's your own lookout. But the GDPR requires them to make it frictionless. And so I think that's why they made this move.
Well, we will definitely revisit this as the feedback comes in. feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. If you want to get all the daily tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes or less, subscribe to dailytechheadlines.com. Well, somewhat on this note, let's segue into our discussion story, and that is corporate responsibility. In fact, something called corporate social responsibility, often abbreviated as CSR, which is a corporation's initiatives to identify and then take responsibility for their effects on environmental and social well-being. Obviously, this is more and more an issue every day. The term generally applies to both efforts that go above and beyond what may be required by regulators or environmental protection groups. Now, certainly in the US and in many other markets as well, 4 companies dominate currently. When you talk about social responsibility, you hear about Amazon, you hear about Apple, you hear about Facebook, and you hear about Google. This leads some people to say, well, this is the big tech. This is what we should be afraid of. These are the companies that are, that have too much power and are potentially ruining things for the rest of us. Social media companies, in their essence, were born out of a better way to connect, right? But issues plague them all, and we hear them over and over. Facebook's Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example. Other tech companies are now parting ways with these big 4 and others on privacy fights. Social platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Google's YouTube and other mainstays, older companies, IBM, Oracle, Salesforce, Cisco, they all want to be seen as responsible players who can be trusted, who care about our data, who have enough wherewithal to make effective change. Annie, I want to kick this over to you. When you think about corporate responsibility and companies saying, we're learning things along the way as we make up the rules, where do you fall on how everybody's doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that of the big 4, they grapple with different problems, but there are some that kind of are apply to all of them. And I think one of them is that this is one of the big topics that we're discussing because of the Facebook news, that it's hard for people to understand how their data is being used and how their data and their transactions are resonating across the web. And that's something that Facebook is obviously dealing with right now, but to a lesser extent, Apple does, and as well as Amazon. I think because of the current zeitgeist, Facebook and Google are struggling with similar problems around content moderation, around issues that arise from being seen as sole sources of information on the web. But I don't think it's exactly clear yet what a fully responsible and social good focused version of Facebook and Google would look like. I think they're not doing great. I mean, I think Facebook is probably it's a younger company and it's slower to figuring these things out. But I think that they probably have the biggest problems to untangle at this point.
Yeah, Scott Galloway, who's a professor of marketing at NYU, he was a co-founder of Red Envelope, has an Esquire article up. It's one of the articles that is the basis for our conversation here. And he points out the combined market cap of Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon is the GDP of France. Those 4 companies make up 24% of the share of the S&P top 500. These are ridiculously large companies. I think some of us who've been following this for as long as the 3 of us have really forget that, it's not Sergey and Larry and their small startup anymore. It's not Jeff Bezos selling books up there in Seattle anymore. Like, these are not only big companies, they're not only more successful. Wow, they're more successful than Microsoft and IBM. These are the 4 biggest companies in the world. Apple is the biggest company by market cap in the world. And yet they still all suffer from that same problem we have, which is they think of themselves as small, nimble disruptors. And when you're the largest, you're not disrupting anything anymore. You're just causing problems.
Yeah, and I think that, I was around, for example, the issue of content moderation. Both Facebook and Google are, making a big deal out of the fact that they're hiring thousands of more people to help keep the communities safe and to police, objectionable content on their sites. But, one of the issues is that how scalable is that? And secondly, it's all very reactive. It's like they don't seem to make the changes until it gets reported about in the press. At the end of the day, only they have full visibility into what's going on their platform. The rest of us don't. So it takes either reporters or it takes, other watchdogs to dig up those stories, and then they seem to react to it. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what the possibilities are for having them be publicly regulated in some way. I think we'll be having that conversation in the next few months, but only they know, how their data is being used.
Yeah, Galloway's got a really interesting take on this. Because he is a Silicon Valley insider. He has started several companies, and he talks about the fact that his students actually leave his program at NYU and go get jobs at Amazon. But he makes a long, impassioned defense, which I think needs a little more evidence, that maybe we should break up these companies: Amazon, AWS, Prime Video, Apple, iTunes, 2 separate companies. Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram, 3 separate companies. Google and YouTube, 2 separate companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that's actually the solution. He uses Microsoft as an example, although Microsoft never got broken up. So maybe what you need is to hold their feet to the fire the way they did with Microsoft to force the better behavior. Although he tries to make the argument that Microsoft being brought before the courts and almost broken up by the courts caused them to behave better. I think it was just the fact that you had Google and Apple and Facebook resurgent that caused Microsoft to act better because suddenly they were facing more competition.
Well, and anti-competitive laws are very different than what people are accusing something of Facebook doing at this point. It's you can't say like, well, Microsoft did it right in the past, so maybe Facebook should take a page out of their book. This is unprecedented issues that we're dealing with. And I don't think that if a company is strong enough to, I'm not trying to give anybody a pass, is what I'm saying. But at the same time, I'm not sure that, we can all say, well, you should have done it differently. But I don't know in hindsight if that's realistic for a lot of these companies, no matter how big they are.
As big as they are, Annie, how much animosity do you think is inside Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C., and how much is actually felt outside?
I think it's probably less than what those of us in Silicon Valley think. I would guess that there's a very large chunk of the Facebook user base that doesn't know what's happening or care. We're also in the United States, and this conversation is happening, in the U.S., and they have users, they have 1 billion users across the world. So do most people care? Probably not. But yeah.
Well, there's a difference between knowing and caring. Yes, the people who just use this stuff and don't follow the issue are less likely to care. But I think there's even people out there that are like, yeah, I know they're the big 4 companies. Yeah, I know they have some practices that are a little shaky, but whatever. Like, that's always been true, and maybe they just expect someone to eventually do something about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if it doesn't affect their customer experience in any way, they're less likely to care. If Amazon keeps on, providing the best customer service, is anyone at any point going to care about what they're doing under the hood? That day will probably come for Amazon in some way, shape, or form, but it's happening right now with Facebook. I do think that there's some ill will towards Facebook, at least here in our country, because of the conversation that's happening about, around politics. Around the rest of the world, I don't know.
I asked on our Facebook group, on our Daily Tech News Show Facebook group, hey, you all have obviously not deleted Facebook. Why is that? And there's about 3 classes of responses. One is, yeah, I always know they're up to something, and I'm careful. Another is, I'd like to go somewhere else I don't know where to go. And then there's the people like, yeah, I don't love what they do, but I get so much out of it that, it's still worth it to me. And I think the fact that you've got 2/3 of those responses like that is why Facebook is able to continue on the way they're going. And I don't know what kind of intervention would change that. Hey, thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. You can submit stories and vote on them at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com and, of course, facebook.com/groups/dailytechnewsshow. What's in the mailbag, Sarah?
Well, we were talking to Dr. Kiki Sanford yesterday, and we were unsure about what the plural of octopus was. Tom and I were like, it's octopi, of course. Ben, who says he's from rainy and 8-armed Seattle, says you were struggling a little bit with the plural of this, and one of the things that was included in my training for volunteering at the Seattle Aquarium, where multiple giant Pacific octopuses are often found on display, was this very topic. The official plural of octopus is octopuses. However, the alternative is not octopi, as the root of octopus is Greek and not Latin. The proper alternative is octopodes, which rhymes with electrodes.
So not octopodes.
No, as one might consider would be the Greek way to do it. No. I mean, mind blown, guys. I was really sure that it was octopi.
At least Ben admits that octopi is fun to say, which is really the only reason I brought it up.
Sure, yeah. Did you know that the singular form of data is datum?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, you did. I didn't. Okay,
I knew
both of you
that
did.
datum.
Roger probably did too.
knew that as well.
Well, screw you guys.
Well, you should have. What you should have done is asked us to what's the singular of data, and make us prove it, because it's easy for us to say, oh yeah.
Hey, do you know this thing? Yep, I did.
Yep,
Yeah.
sure did.
Bummer. So yeah, octopodes.
Octopodes. Got it. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you,
We
Ben.
have the
And
smartest
also,
audience in the world.
Exactly.
Even plurals of octopus. They know everything.
The hive mind makes us all smarter. Thanks also to Annie Gaus for joining us. Annie, so fun to have you. It's been great. Tell folks where they can get in touch with all the other stuff you're doing online.
Yeah, the best place to get in touch would be on twitter.com, twitter.com/Annie Gaus.
That's ANNIEGAUS.
GAUS.
Hey, folks, we're getting near the end of the month, and our goal every month, among the many goals, we have a goal. If we can get to 22,000 on Patreon, we'd like to add another roundtable, and I think after next week's roundtable, you might want to get more of these. But our first goal is to get more patrons than last month. Right now, we're about 22 patrons less than last month, so we need 23 new people to join us. If you've been thinking about it, if you've got an extra $1 a month and you think the show is at least worth 5 cents an episode, all you got to do is go to patreon.com/DTNS. You can get access to an exclusive RSS feed with bonus content. There's all kinds of cool posts. You get early access to the DTNS Labs episodes and more. Mostly, though, you get to make the show happen, and you get to say, hey, I did that. I'm a producer of Daily Tech News Show. That's patreon.com/DTNS.
Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. If you have questions, comments, want to weigh in on anything, bring it to us, please. We are live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC. You can find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live.
Back tomorrow with Shannon Morse and Len Peralta. Talk to you then.
Woohoo!
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Well, I have Diamond Club. Thank you for asking.
I enjoyed this program too.
I enjoyed it too. Annie, you were great.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys.
Of course.
Absolutely.
So many issues to talk about. This man.
It's been a week, hasn't it?
I know.
Yeah, as somebody pointed out on Twitter that it's a crazy week when Uber kills someone and it's like the third most important tech story.
Right. Oh, I know.
I was having dinner the other night with a couple of friends, and they were going on and on about Facebook stuff and whatever, and in order to break the ice, but also to say, I was like, well, in other news, Uber killed somebody. And it was like, what in the heck is going on?
Yeah.
Really weird news week.
You knew this was coming, right? You knew that there were only so many millions of miles that autonomous cars could happen before this happens, because it happens. Cars run into people and kill them. and I'm not trying to make the mathematical argument about which one is safer, but you knew this was coming. In the tech world, there aren't always huge scandalous stories about Facebook every day. It is odd that these things coincided like that.
Yeah. You guys know my story about almost getting hit by a self-driving Uber, right?
Do
No?
tell.
Oh, man. I have a very, personal relationship to this topic. But this was so do you remember when they made this big deal out of rolling out driverless cars in San Francisco? And this was in
Right, and there was the whole controversy whether they had the permits and all that, right?
Right. This was in, I think, December 2016. And that morning, like, I opened up my phone. I was like, oh, Twitter's rolling out driverless cars. You can hail a driverless car in San Francisco today. How exciting. I go to work. I'm in a Lyft, and I'm crossing Van Ness in San Francisco, this big intersection. And my car crossing the intersection, a car runs a red light and comes within like 5 feet of smashing into us. I look up, and lo and behold, it's one of the Uber driverless cars. So I turned around, like, took a picture, put it on Twitter. That tweet went viral.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up getting, like, quoted in all of these, like, stories about it. And Uber then had to backtrack and, like, in this really interesting way and say, like, well, it's not really that driverless, so people shouldn't be scared. It's actually kind of mostly human drivers, operating them. It's mostly PR bluster, and that's kind of where they had to land on that.
Yeah. I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah.
But yes, we knew this was coming.
It was just a matter of time and miles, kilometers. Title wise, there were two that I liked. One was Too Big to Be Startups, and the other one was Too Big to Succeed.
I like Too Big to Be Startups.
I'm wondering if a lot of it has to do with the fact that for a lot of these companies, they take a lot of the personality from their founders, right? Whoever they may be, and so I think a reflection of the company culture might just very well be a reflection of the founder or the leadership at top. And maybe it's time for a rethink on the people at the top.
That's an easy thing to say. No. I'm not sure how true it is. It certainly was true of Uber, right? Like, they definitely took their company culture cue from Kalanick, and changing him was the right move. I don't know that really changes all these problems, though. Like, if you remove Jeff Bezos, does Amazon maybe it just stops being so successful, right? Because maybe the next person isn't as good at it as him, but I don't know if that really changes. The problem isn't the company culture with Amazon. The problem is just how ridiculously large they are. And Amazon is the new big threat because they're now number 2 to Apple. They are threatening to become the largest company in the world, and they're reaching their tentacles into logistics and healthcare and all of these things. I don't know that changing Bezos changes that.
Yeah, and also, who out there can run Amazon? I mean, I don't know who kind of the other people at the top are, their specific, abilities, but it's hard to imagine them just shoehorning someone in to run Facebook.
I mean, I guess what I would say, Roger, is you're right that, the company cultures are certainly dictated by these founders, especially in these charismatic founders, right? But I don't know that removing them is
maybe not so much not so much removed, but it's, for example, what you gave about Bezos, like if you replaced Bezos, maybe the person or persons that would replace him or supplant him have different objectives. Right now, you could broadly say they all want the company to be successful.
Well,
but there's more than one path to being successful.
We have a test case, which is the replacement of Steve Jobs.
Okay.
But
yes, but I mean, like,
wait, silent.
Well, the thing is that he
shoot. Tom strikes again.
He died.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad, right?
I mean,
I know,
yeah,
but
he was replaced.
we had, you know, this incredibly large, successful, disruptive tech company have their leader replaced.
Well, and I would actually go back to Apple then, because I would say if you look at Apple when they pushed him out and they replaced him with, you know, with a handful of other people.
You're talking about in the 90s, right?
Back in the 90s, that company was close to faltering. It was close to you know, being bankrupted when they brought him back, and he again because of his personality, he pushed the company in a new direction. They started cutting off a bunch of avenues that they were exploring. Mac clones, they were looking at the Newton, they were doing all these other things, wasn't really paying off. And Steve Jobs said, one, we're going to cut off the clones. They're basically cannibalizing our sales. They're not expanding it. Cut that off. We're going in this direction with desktops. We're going to do iMacs. We're gonna go with these kind of more colorful, candy colored kind of designs and stuff. And that's kind of where the company started kind of rebounding. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if it's just, you know, we just haven't had Steve Jobs off long enough to kind of see his influence kind of wane as his ideas that he mapped out, you know, are over, and they have to start coming up with new ones post Steve ideas. Maybe he was just so awesome that his echo will live for another decade.
So you're arguing for Jobs' exceptionalism, that he doesn't, but isn't your thing like these company founders are so charismatic and so exceptional that they set this culture?
And I mean, I'm wondering, like, you know, well, I'm not saying that cutting off the head, I hate to use that term, but to replace the head would somehow alter the company's.
Let's be clear. Roger is not arguing for the decapitations.
No decapitation strikes. No, what I'm saying is, like, you know, it's, you know, if they truly want to change, I mean, you know, it's all good and to say I'm sorry, and you're looking at your feet as you kind of like, you caught me, and
you're
all
talking
that,
about Zuckerberg now, right?
Zuckerberg, specifically. But I mean,
my point was his rhetoric is not. I mean, he's sorry, right? But his rhetoric shows like he doesn't get the problem.
Mm.
Yeah, exactly. No, he doesn't understand the problem.
It's not that he's being disingenuous. I don't think.
I'm not saying
he's BSing. No, I know you're not.
But I'm saying is that you can't have the captain lead the ship and solve the problem when he's, you know, what they used to say about GM. The people that got GM into the state of affairs that they were in the late 90s, early 2000s near bankruptcy aren't the same group of people that are going to pull it out of that crisis. In the same respect, some of these crisis of faith and trust in these companies are not going to be rectified with the same group of leadership that we have currently running.
Yeah, but that implies that the problem is concentrated in the leadership, and I don't know that I don't think.
I think that's kind of a cop out, though.
I think it's not a cop out. I'm saying that the problem is endemic throughout the entire system, and if you just concentrate on trying to solve the leadership, you won't solve the problem. You can take Zuckerberg out and put somebody else in, and you will still have the Facebook problem. Because the other thing that happens, and I've seen this firsthand, as have you at CNET, is a company develops a culture that is independent of the people in charge of it, and persists no matter who is running it. It's large enough and has enough people that it just has a momentum of its own.
I mean, I agree with that, and I'm not saying that again that a simple replacement of people at the top will solve everything, but you need, I mean, it's at the same time, it's not saying that if you just leave them in there, you know, it's because, well, you know, that won't change anything. And so, well, we'll have to find another solution. It's part of I think it's part of a top to bottom examination of the entire industry, right? So it's not just
I just wouldn't go there first. Like that could help solve the problem along with other things. I think you could do other things that would probably solve the problem without having to change the people in charge. So to me, that's lower down on the priority list.
I don't know. I don't think it's lower. I think it's like one of those things you have to do in tandem. I mean, there has to be, I don't know. I mean, it just seems that you it's hard to say because not all companies run the same, and they don't all have the same personality. Some take to changes in brass better than others do. Some have a very independent streak. Seen it that you mended. Didn't matter, right? Shelby, whoever else was running the show, it just was the same company, khakis and button downs.
Hey, leave Kathy alone. She didn't do anything.
It was the weirdest company to work for. I thought I fell into the step instead of the Stepford wives. But I think I think part of it me is I think they are culpable or at least responsible in some respect, and they should understand that and not so much be like how do we unchain ourselves from this particular crisis and then move beyond. It's more like how do we solve this so we don't have to look at it down in another
but you're assuming
years.
They're not.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if I'm right or wrong, because these things aren't an overnight thing, right? They don't turn on a dime, and
And there aren't simple solutions.
Cultural things applied in corporations take time to change, and sometimes they never change, and the company just needs to go bust. Everyone spreads to the four
or it
winds.
doesn't need to go bust. Maybe there needs to be some kind of outside pressure. Maybe there needs to be a change in the landscape. Maybe it just needs time for people to realize what's going on and sort of understand the tools at their disposal and allow someone to come along and provide an alternative. I mean, the idea that Microsoft wouldn't be part of this conversation, except as an example from the past, is pretty crazy to 1999 me, right? Microsoft felt unassailable. No one will ever get rid of Internet Explorer. No one will ever think Windows is irrelevant. And Internet Explorer is gone, and Windows is not really essential to the conversation anymore.
But no, it's true.
Things change. That's what I'm saying. And
it's true.
And you did have to have Microsoft come to account for themselves in court for that to happen, but they didn't actually, at least in the United States. Europe's a different matter. They didn't really have to make them do anything about it. In Europe, what they did make them do was fairly superficial.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you could argue also that Bill Gates stepping down and then what was his name? Young Frankenstein. Ballmer. Came in, and then Satya Nadella. I mean, there was a noticeable shift.
Right, but what caused the shift is the question.
Well, it might be a chicken or egg thing. I think it's both. I think you can't just say one always precedes the other. As you're correct, you can't always replace leadership and expect a change in the company. We've seen that not just in tech, but also in other corporations. But at the same time, you just can't leave it there to fester and then expect everything underneath it.
But Microsoft almost had that. They almost had exactly that. Like in 2000, people thought, Microsoft got off easy. Yeah, they're fine. They're going to be able to keep doing this forever.
You know what? People thought that the 2008, with the near bankruptcy of GM, would kick him in the seat to do things, and then a couple of years later, we find out about the ignition scandal. So, I mean, there's just a lot of things that happen in corporations that isn't. I mean, that's an
anecdote. Yeah, that's an anecdote.
Well, it's not my personal anecdote. I mean, that's
but I mean that is an anecdote. That's not a.
That are. I mean, there are things that happen to companies that cause them to change. You're correct.
Yes. Correct.
It could either come from an outside source. It could be pressure groups. It could be whatever. I think that
it could be their own shareholders.
But what I could say,
Facebook has already gotten pressure from their shareholders around the fake news stuff and harassment.
That happened with Uber too, right?
Yeah, and the stock has been, in a spiral ever since this. I'm actually checking right now.
Stock spiral.
So that could be one area of pressure too. 164.
What I'm saying is that does not preclude them from maybe shaking up the top as well. How's that? I mean, it's.
I have a question. So Mark Zuckerberg is really hard to read. Like I find him really, and he's got this. Listening to him talk is kind of like, it's hard to get a sense of where he's really at least for me. Do you think that he personally was unaware that this type of abuse that happened with Cambridge Analytica was possible or probable? Or do you think that he was aware that this was something that was a possibility, this type of breach was something that was a possibility, and just was like, I don't think it's a problem?
I think, and I don't know if it's Zuckerberg in particular, but I think the Facebook culture was, you know what? Put that stuff out there. Most people won't abuse it. We'll keep an eye out. If we hear of abuse, we'll follow up. And that's exactly what they did when they heard about the fact that Kogan had handed over his data to SCR, whatever Cambridge Analytica's parent company was. They went and said, hey, you guys, that's not cool. We're all friends here. We got Facebook people working on Kogan's papers with him. Just delete it. All right. Are we cool? Just delete it. And they're like, great. Yeah. Check box.
No
we deleted it. Right. You told Bob to delete it, right? Yeah, no, I totally told Bob okay, Facebook, it's all deleted. It's all good. And they didn't delete it. Right. So this is the era. Think about it, right? This is the era of the startup where you have like 20 employees and everybody's like, we can't keep an eye on everything, but it's all good. We just keep, failing faster and it's all going to be fine. At this point in 2015, they're too big to act like that. And they're realizing it because they're changing their rules. Right. But it comes to blow back on them in 2018 when they're even bigger.
But I think, a lot of this is like, again, I don't work at any of these companies, but again, it's easy to say like, you have so many thousands of people working there. What is your problem? But until a situation arises where you have to fix the problem, you have a lot of people working on all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. So never a problem before.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a new problem. Like, show me a company that's had to deal with this before and weathered the storm appropriately, which Facebook is not adhering to. It's new territory. Doesn't mean that the company isn't, making mistakes. And Zuckerberg had said exactly that yesterday. But it's hard for me to say like, well, you should have known, because none of us. I mean, we weren't talking about this 6 months ago.
Yeah. They're also paying for past sins. This is a thing that people got mad about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I guess, and made Facebook change. And now they're paying the consequences for having not changed it before that. Because this is only a problem because it's 50 million because some of your friends' data got shared because Facebook used to let you share your friends' data. I still don't think this data is as nearly as useful as a lot of people think. There's a lot of Mechanical Turk stuff. It's not a representative sample of any kind.
Yeah, and if somebody takes a quiz about like what zoo animal they would be.
I'm not trying to let Facebook off the hook for it because it's
but I think a lot of it is like, vague behavioral things that you can pin on people, but not necessarily really valuable data in most cases.
Because they're talking about the fact that the same professor got some anonymized data from Facebook that sounds like it was actually the basis of his papers. Like that was the useful stuff. This other stuff was maybe useful for creating a model or two, or at least helping create a model, but that data was not valuable. What was valuable was that anonymized data, which was anonymized and disclosed and released in the proper manner. I think that's part of it too, is Facebook's like, oh, well, that's garbage data anyway. And that doesn't take into account, like, we don't care if it's garbage data. You don't let it happen. You don't let the precedent happen.
And on that note, any last words before I sign us off?
Only that you're all the best.
All the best. Group hug. You know what? I'm going to start up a social networking.
Let's start our own social network, guys.
Yeah. It can't be that hard, right?
Yeah, it can't be that hard.
Yeah. Talk to me in 10 years, says Mark Zuckerberg.
Fast forward to 2032 when we're all in jail.
All right. See you tomorrow.